Hello, friends. My name is Gail Eady. My husband John and I are members of Westmoreland Congregational United Church of Christ in Bethesda, Maryland. In November of last year, 2022, we joined a group of 20 pilgrims from our church and from churches around the country on an 18-day trip to Palestine and Israel for the purposes of witnessing for ourselves the holy sites, the flashpoints for conflict, the human rights violations, and the rhythms of daily life for ordinary people in the region. As the days unfolded, we found ourselves nearly overwhelmed with information, evidence, nuanced circumstances, complicated history, and a sort of hopelessness that was hard to describe and impossible to escape. We began to write a summary of our experience that included facts of life today in the Holy Land, the historical turning points that produced the current intransigent situation, and a way forward for each of us as we incorporate the trip's powerful effects on our hearts and minds. I have been asked to present that summary in a way that might be useful to a wider audience. I was a latecomer to the trip, having listened with ignorant interest but little engagement to my church's Middle East Committee activities over the years. I had bought Palestinian olive oil, an important outreach ministry of our church, but not consistently. I had never attended a committee meeting or other church-wide committee event. Some of my best friends were committee members, yet I remained detached and too busy with other things after church. I had already been to Jerusalem decades before and just didn't feel compelled to go again. But then several prior commitments became unnecessary, and I read through the itinerary and program for the journey. It was clearly going to be a different sort of trip, with many opportunities to delve below the surface and be educated on a complex and tragic history. So I changed my mind and signed on. Some of my fellow pilgrims knew a lot about the Israeli occupation of Palestine. Others, like me, knew next to nothing. Some had seen the extraordinary landscapes, the ancient Greek, Roman, Byzantine, and Islamic sites built over 4,000 years, or the iconic Christian sites, such as the Sea of Galilee and the Church of the Nativity, and many others, while others were filled with the wonder of laying eyes on them for the first time. The trip was a mixture of sightseeing and informational sessions with unimaginably courageous and dedicated Palestinians and Israelis trying to make a difference for a disadvantaged, persecuted people. My husband and I were a bit skeptical about the perception of bias towards the plight of Palestinians communicated over the years by our Middle East Committee, and wondered if we would hear from Israelis about their perspective. We were concerned about the stigmatizing label of anti-Semitism that might be applied to those supporting the Palestinian cause for justice at the expense of the Israeli one for security. But these were the concerns of the uninformed. There is a complex web of facts on the ground that drive the resistance to the illegal Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories. Here are just a few basic ones. Number one, the Israeli state seeks to advance the supremacy of Jewish citizens throughout the area, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. The Oslo II Accord divided the area into 3 administrative units, each with a different set of rights for Christian and Muslim Palestinians. These rights are always inferior to the rights of Jews. Over the years, this policy has developed into Israeli apartheid, a regime that uses laws and courts, restrictions on freedom of movement, denial of political rights, and organized violence to cement that supremacy. Israel manipulates an absentee property law that allows the state to take property from Palestinians who fled or were driven out in 1948 and grant this property to Jewish settlers who do not need a permit to build or renovate a home. Israel destroys the homes of Palestinians by claiming their land for Israel, and then builds settlements for conservative Jewish settlers on that stolen land. Israeli settlements are modern, bustling towns with homes and gardens, schools and shops built on hilltops for security purposes. Electricity, water, new roads, and other infrastructure are readily available to settlers, yet Palestinians must apply for permits or pay twice what the settlers do or live without these basic services. Palestinians must apply for permits to build anything on their own land, to renovate their homes, to improve schools, to plant trees in their gardens, and most permits are arbitrarily denied. Israeli settlements have been deliberately located so as to fragment Palestinians on their land, making stable, consistent governance, as well as organized resistance, nearly impossible. Palestinians must apply for and carry ID cards wherever they go. They must submit special applications for permits to move between the 3 units of Palestinian territory. Israel controls all the routes between them, which allows the military to establish checkpoints, close off access to villages, block roads, and close checkpoints at will. Although in 2005, Israel withdrew its settlers and military forces from the Gaza Strip, occupied since the 1967 Six-Day War, Israel effectively retains a blockade and thus control over every aspect of life, including the seaports, the airspace, electricity and water supplies, and all borders, effectively trapping Gaza's 2 million residents imprisoned in their own land. Israel abuses a law originally passed by the British called administrative detention, which they apply to children and the elderly, in addition to adults, to detain and imprison people for minor infractions without due process for indefinite periods of time. These facts of life were laid out and described for us by some of the most remarkable people we had ever met. We met with administrator Amjad Musli and 3 students at Bethlehem University who described their personal lives and challenges of getting an education. Amjad has been to the US 13 times, yet has never been granted a permit to go to Jerusalem, just a few kilometers away. We met with one Israeli father and one Palestinian father, Rami El-Nahan, who were friends and members of the Parents Circle, and heard them give impassioned pleas for justice and peace, despite each having lost a daughter to the violence. Rami is one of the protagonists in A Paragon, Colin McCann's masterful novel based on historical events and real people. We met with Oded Ravivi, the mayor of Efrat, a prominent and prosperous Israeli settlement, and listened to him describe and spin the historical and current concessions made to Palestinians without acknowledging the pain and persecution of occupation. We toured a section of Hebron with Yaniv, an Israeli veteran and guide suffering from PTSD as a result of his war experiences, who touched us with his candor and commitment. His organization of Israeli veterans, called Breaking the Silence, strives to expose the reality of everyday life in the occupied territories and bring an end to the occupation. We visited the family farm of Daoud Nassar and his Tent of Nations organization, beneficiary of our olive oil ministry, and heard a poignant story of stolen land, arbitrary destruction of olive trees, legal manipulation, and soul-deadening delays in fighting to preserve his rights to his own family property. We met with Mona Hodali, Senior Clinical Supervisor at another Global Ministries mission partner, the East Jerusalem YMCA, who has helped to further develop a technique to treat trauma of all kinds in children and adults suffered as a result of the military occupation. We met with Munter Isaac, pastor of Bethlehem Lutheran Christmas Church and board member of Kairos Palestine, and heard him give an impassioned talk about Christian work and witness under occupation. We met with Danny Seidemann, director of Terrestrial Jerusalem, an Israeli lawyer working on Palestinian rights for 50 years, monitoring the deliberate illegal land acquisitions designed to choke off access to Jerusalem. He described a long-term strategy by the Israeli government to use the national park system to put Christian holy sites under their control, a grave concern to the Vatican and other churches who manage these sites. We heard an Israeli activist for human rights at Global Ministries mission partner B'Tselem, an Israeli human rights organization, discuss their researched reports which document the Israeli policy of apartheid towards Palestinians. We had a delightful tour given by the assistant principal of Rawat al-Zahur School, a private K-8 Palestinian school that serves Christian and Muslim families, teaching a curriculum that includes values of human rights, peacemaking, and kindness, and does not exclude all mention of Palestine and its cultural traditions, as Israeli schools do. The children sang "We Shall Overcome" in Arabic and English, encouraging us to join them. For Americans of a certain age, it was a poignant moment. We heard Melina, a dynamic and dedicated Palestinian lawyer for Adamir, Prisoner Support and Human Rights Association, one of 6 Palestinian NGOs declared by Israel to be terrorist organizations, discuss systemic abuses during the arrest process and inside detention centers and prisons, as well as roadblocks to justice thrown up by police, the courts, and governmental agencies. We heard Sam Bahour, a Palestinian-American businessman and founder of Applied Information Management, discuss obstacles to free enterprise, earning a living wage, and establishing and running a business. We were led on a tour of the Palestinian neighborhood of Silwan by Talia Ezrahi, an Israeli guide from Emek Sheva, and also of the archaeological dig just outside the walls of the old city of Jerusalem, where a national park has been created and now expanded in an effort to apply pressure on Palestinian families who live within its boundaries to give up their homes and leave. Palestinians use creative ways to let their Israeli oppressors know that their illegal actions are being watched. We listened with dismay to Ayat Ansari, a legal researcher and peace activist, tell us she was leaving Israel for Qatar, where she can lead a free and independent life without daily harassment and humiliation, resulting from her efforts to teach social justice norms in Palestinian schools. Finally, at the end of the trip, we felt transformed. Just how that takes shape will make itself clear over some period of time as we find ways to express outrage and dismay, to advocate for justice, and to contribute to our church's already strong commitment to giving aid to a suffering people. Trip leader Janet Wright notes that exerting political pressure is an important way to fight for change. Yet, considering how powerful supporters of the State of Israel are in the US, and how generous US funding enables the Israeli military occupation, a groundswell of people pressing for change is required for success. Politicians have too much to lose without numbers on their side. From all of this, we came home with a profound appreciation for what our church and others have been doing for decades to advocate for justice and human rights, and to offer help in the form of meaningful engagement and badly needed funds. We came home energized to renew awareness among all churches and other institutions working for peace and justice, so that despite the wider world's attention being turned aside onto other explosive crises, the daily grind of oppression in the Holy Land must not be ignored, the people not forgotten, and our own government's complicity in all of that not go unchallenged. A highlight of our tour was the Sunday sermon at the Cathedral Church of St. George the Martyr in Jerusalem. Masterfully delivered by Reverend Canon Dean Sewell, he ended his remarks in this way.
We know that the actions of individuals and groups can make a difference,
and followers of Jesus have particular reasons to be compelled to work for peace. But wherever we live and whoever we are, Christians cannot be oblivious to injustice or complacent about suffering. Whilst we may be distressed by so much that prevails in the world, not least in this part of the world, each of us can make our own contribution to standing against injustice and striving for peace and reconciliation. St. Paul, writing to the church in Thessalonica, puts it with admirable simplicity. Brothers and sisters, do not be weary in doing what is right.
Imagine there's no heaven. See if you try. No hell below us. Above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger, or brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one.
Peace train sounding loud, glide on the peace train. Liseka, come on, peace train. Peace train on its way.
I've been happy lately, thinking about the good things to come, and I believe it could be, someday it's going to come. Well, I've been smiling lately, dreaming about the world as one, and I believe it could be, someday it's going to come. Someday it's going to come, come take me home again. Come on, the peace train. Someday it's going to come. Come on, the peace train. Take me home again. Oh, peace train sounding louder. Glide on the peace train. Come on, peace train. As out on the edge of darkness, there rides a peace train. Oh, peace train, take this country, come take me home again. Oh, I've been smiling lately, thinking about the world as one, and I believe it could be. Someday it's going to come, someday it's going to come, come take me home again. Come on the peace train. Someday it's going to come. Come on the peace train. Take me home again. Someday it's going to come. Someday it's going to come. Someday, someday, someday it's going to come. I've been crying lately, thinking about the world as it is. Why must we go on hating? Why can't we live in bliss? Peace train sounding louder. Glide on the peace train. Come on, peace train. Someday it's going to come. Come take me home again. Come on, peace train. Someday it's going to come. Come on, peace train. Take me home again. Come take me home. Come take me home. Come take me home again. Someday it's going to come. Come take me home again. Come on, peace train. Someday it's going to come. Come take me home again. Come on, peace train. Someday it's going to come. Come take me home again. Come on, peace train. Someday it's going to come. Out on the edge of darkness, there rides a peace train. Peace train, take this country. Come take me home again. Come take me home again. Come take me home.